Yesterday we spoke about combat. Today we speak about how to make sure that you can actually make it to combat and do interesting things while you do. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and let's talk some tips for character building in Final Fantasy Tactics. Hello everyone, if you enjoy what I do, including my ongoing coverage of Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, then a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the support on all of the content that we've done thus far. If you have any requests for particular types of content, guides, etc. around the Ivalice Chronicles, do please let me know in the comments, and I will do my best to accommodate as many of them as possible. Today we are talking character and army building, from everything from what Brave and Faith actually do and how to raise them, to even the different ways that elements of magic interact with not only enemies, but the world around you. There's a lot to discuss, so let us begin. Number 1. Get vital skills from both Squire and Chemist before moving on to other jobs. I always like to start these videos with the most basic of the basic, and for any old head who knows Final Fantasy Tactics, as long as I've known Final Fantasy Tactics, this is the number one piece of advice that they will give to anyone and everyone. Squire and Chemist are the baseline not just for physical or magical classes, but for all jobs in general, as well as pretty much just gameplay in general for Final Fantasy Tactics. Squire is going to give you some of the most important base level movement and utility abilities you can get with things like JP boost, movement +1, focus for not only increasing your actual physical attack power, but also getting a ton of JP very quickly, and stone throw for a very basic low level, but solid enough range damage option. Chemist does the same with things like Potion and Phoenix Down, absolute must-haves for any character that's going to be fulfilling any sort of healing role, as well as great options like Auto Potion or the other more utility-based items to make sure that you have the survivability and the utility that you need to keep a particular character or the army as a whole going. As such, you want to make sure that you spend an appropriate amount of time in both of these jobs before you start moving a character into whatever their actual designated role is going to be. JP Boost in particular, despite the seeming changes to the Spillover JP mechanic, which we'll talk about in a minute here, is still an absolute must-have. You get so much more JP with JP Boost equipped, and when JP is what allows you to learn all of your different abilities and level up your jobs to get new jobs, you can imagine that having that multiplier is going to be extremely valuable for you. Movement +1, just giving you extra move range, has an array of benefits that I don't need to tell you. Just being able to move farther is hugely beneficial. And then being able to just heal and res and heal when you get hit from Chemist, how can you go wrong with that? Number 2, Brave and Faith. Combat units want low faith, casters want high faith, both want high brave. So the bravery and faith mechanic is definitely one of the more interesting overall stat mechanics in Final Fantasy Tactics, and it probably deserves a video all on its own, to be perfectly honest with you, but just as a baseline understanding, this is what you need to know. Your physical melee characters, most of the time, want maximized Brave, as much as you can get, up to the cap of 97, because Brave dictates so much in terms of your physical damage output and your ability to use reaction commands. Some of the most powerful physical attack options in the game, such as Knight Swords, Brawler punching with monks, and Samurai with their katanas, are very reliant on Brave to maximize the damage that they can deal. And if you have high Brave and you attack with these options, you will see that you do crushing amounts of damage. As far as reaction abilities are concerned, who's the most likely to be able to take a hit and then react in combat? Your heavy melee fighters. So again, having high Brave to make sure that you're triggering things like counter tackle, Shira Hidori, etc. is absolutely vital. You will feel the difference if a character is in melee and has low Brave versus high Brave. But even for non-combat units, this is still extremely vital, because again, you want to be able to trigger those reaction abilities that may very well save your, say, Black Mage's life with much more reliability. So keeping your Brave high is extremely important. As far as Faith is concerned, it gets a little bit more interesting. Faith dictates both how accurate you are with magic and how likely your magic effects are to land, but also how much damage you deal and take when dealing with magical attacks. As such, you do want your mages to have high faith, you just also want to protect them from other mages because this is a two-way street. That said, a mage with maxed out faith, as high as you can safely get, around 90, 92, is going to deal crushing amounts of damage with magical attacks. On the flip side, having your melee fighters, or just your physical fighters, have low faith will then protect them from enemy mages' attacks. They'll still take damage, but nowhere near as much. So outside of specific scenarios where you're relying on a lot of magical buffs with a very magic-centric team, in which case you're going to want higher faith, it's good to have these types of characters be lower on faith. Speaking of the importance of Brave and Faith, we have number 3. When recruiting new warriors from the Warriors Guild, you can reroll your options by fully backing out of the shop and re-entering. The two major use cases for this are 1, looking for particular zodiac signs if you're trying to do either roleplay stuff or really min-max your team, and 2, finding good Brave and Faith scores for all the reasons that we just outlined. We won't go through it again because we just talked about it, but if you are looking for particular Brave and Faith scores, if you want to hire a character for a specific role and you don't see those scores represented in the shop currently, just back out, go back in, you'll have a whole new array of characters to fish for, and eventually you will be able to find that perfect stat distribution. Number 4, keep items on everyone in the early game for easy JP gains and efficient healing. There's a lot to talk about in terms of actually grinding out JP and XP in Final Fantasy Tactics. It is a core part of the gameplay loop, but of course you also want to make sure that your characters are, like alive so that they can continue to get XP, and the items command does both of those for you. As we've touched on a couple of times here and in other videos, every time you take an action, you'll get XP and JP for that action. You want XP and JP so that your levels go up, you can get new jobs, get new abilities, etc. And using items for that task is great because then not only are you getting that XP and JP, you're also keeping your team alive. For a very significant portion of the game, just baseline potion and Phoenix down will be more than enough to keep your team up and functional while also continuing to get you those gains. So I do highly recommend keeping the items command and even just those most basic of abilities on call for the majority of your team. You'll find way more opportunities to patch up little wounds and keep everyone functional while also leveling up a lot more than you would if you were just like waiting and not doing anything with your turn. Number 5, keep proper gear on and don't trust the outfitter. This is one that I see a lot of people run into because the shop has this very convenient feature where you can go to the dressing room or the fitting room and the game will just recommend the best gear that is currently on offer that can be equipped by the character that you currently have in the dressing room. Great, very convenient. I can see everything that I need to do. I can buy it all in one go and I can get back to the game. However, the outfitter is a devious bastard, and he doesn't care to tell you that many times there are actually better options for you amongst his stock of wares than what he is currently proposing to you. There's actually a much wider range of gear available in shops than you would expect if you're just using the fitting room all the time, and this issue stems from the fact that the game always wants to give you the best HP and damage items without consideration for maybe MP or what elemental affinities gear has or what special effects it might have for you, etc. One of the biggest examples of this is the fact that the outfitter will always recommend normal clothes or like leather armors for mages, completely ignoring the fact that there's an entire subset of robes which are the actual intended mage gear. Yes, they have lower HP, but they give you much higher MP so you can cast more spells, and as you get further into the game, you'll get very beneficial effects like boosts to your magic attack or other different types of elements, etc. As such, while the fitting room is definitely nice and it's a good way to expedite your shopping once you know what you're doing, you want to make sure that you're actually checking the inventory of the shop, especially each time it updates, to make sure that there's not some like cool niche piece of gear that you otherwise would have no clue about that would be better for one of your teammates. Number 6, and kind of tangentially related to the previous point, choose an element of magic for your black mage. The shop will offer rods with elemental affinity that will boost the associated spell. This is a fun one, and again, one that I see people miss very often, but each school of magic for black mages has an associated rod that you can get pretty early on, like 3 or 4 battles into chapter 1, that actually will boost a particular given school of magic or element of magic. So you've got a fire rod, a blizzard rod, and a thunder rod for fire, blizzard, and thunder magic, respectively, of course. As such, by leaning into a particular school, even if, your black mage does have the ability to use other spells, you can maximize your damage output by having the associated rod equipped. I, in particular, really like blizzard mages because there are a lot of enemies in the game that are weak to blizzard magic, so I will very often have a blizzard rod on a black mage for a long time, even once other quote-unquote better rods are available, because that lower level rod, while having maybe less stats, gives a unique boost to that element that I'm using. So if you feel like speccing out for a particular element in a black magic class, then finding the right rod to go with it is a must. Number 7, certain pieces of armor give stat bonuses. Check them regularly. Once you get near the end of Chapter 1, and then absolutely once you start getting into Chapter 2, you'll find a lot more gear on offer that has special effects or stat bonuses. For example, the headgear item gives you +1 to your physical attack stat, while the green beret item gives +1 to your speed stat, and different characters want different things. Of course, speed is good on everybody universally, but most stats in some way play into your damage capabilities as well. Physical attack is great for swords, axes, punching, etc., while things like longbows and knives actually want more speed than anything else to maximize their damage. As such, you want to make sure that you're paying attention not only to the base HP and MP that these pieces of gear are giving, but also the overall stats that they're providing for your character, especially if you're going for a particular build. This only gets more involved as you proceed through the game and you get even more creative pieces of gear unlocked for you, so make sure that you're checking everything for some interesting little bonus stats. And along with that, number 8, new gear, quote unquote, is not necessarily better gear, quote unquote. A great example of this is when you unlock the Wizard's Robe fairly early on in Chapter 2. This is a great item because it gives you +2 magic attack and a decent amount of MP for any mage that equips it, or even like a knight if you wanted to put it on them and have a weird like hybrid spell sword thing going on. This will, from a raw damage standpoint, be far better than a lot of the latter robes that you will wind up unlocking, even if they have better baseline stats, because it just boosts your damage potential so much. As a result, I very often keep wizard robes on my wizards and my priests for a long time, until I finally get to the point where I have either so much of an HP and MP disparity that I need to upgrade, or I even get to the point where more robes with an equivalent magic attack boost are provided. It's not something that you always have to do, but it is oftentimes at least worth considering. So make sure that you're checking the balance when you're upgrading your gear. Number 9, JP Spillover. Okay, we mentioned this briefly before, now it's time to get into it. There's a mechanic in the game where a portion of the JP that is gained by a character will be shared to every other party member, letting them slowly grow jobs that they don't have unlocked. Essentially what this means is, say you have a chemist in your party, and that chemist takes part in every battle, and they get a fair amount of use. That means that every other character that you have deployed, each fight will get a small amount of chemist JP. So over time, you can even buy them very powerful skills, like again, your potion, Phoenix Down, auto potion, high potion, X potion, ethers, elixirs, all that type of stuff, without necessarily even having to step foot into chemist. This is a really nice way of being able to flesh out characters' builds without necessarily screwing up their whole setup and switching jobs constantly. And it's something that you can focus if you really want to get a ton of JP from a particular job very, very quickly. You can make 2, 3, hell even 4 characters that job, and whoever is not currently that job will get that bonus from everybody. Now, what's interesting about this mechanic, because it's something that has always existed, is it seems like it has been buffed from previous versions of the game to help you get more abilities faster, something that the dev team in the pre-release period stated that they wanted to fix. From my research and what I've been told by others as I've been looking into it, the JP spillover mechanic used to be a flat 20% gain. So if you gained, say, 10 JP taking an action, you would get 2 JP for everyone else. Now, according to the in-game tutorials, the spillover mechanic has been buffed to 1/4 specifically. So that would be a 5% increase from where it was before. If that's correct, we of course need to do testing to see what the thresholds are, if it rounds up, rounds down. You know, if you got 10 JP for an action, does that mean that your ally characters get 3 JP now? Does it round up from 2 to 3 because you're at 25%, but obviously there's no like clear 25% without having a second digit to work with? Or is it just 2 until you get enough JP from actions that it can actually hit that 25% mark? No one really knows yet. A lot of testing is required for this, and we need to see if that description in the menus is even accurate. But I've been talking about how it feels like JP gains have been boosted across the board, and this spillover mechanic seems to be the culprit for that, and it is a very welcome culprit indeed. Number 10, and we touched on this in the previous point as well, to quickly grind up new jobs, have multiple characters train it simultaneously, as that JP spillover will stack. There'll be certain points in the game where you just hit a threshold, where you get a bunch of more quote-unquote advanced jobs unlocked, and you might want a bunch of those jobs on your team, or there might be a particular ability from one of those jobs that you want on everybody. One of the big ones back in the day was Teleport from Time Mage, which used to cost a measly like 600 JP. Now it's 3,000, so it might not be as automatic of a go-to, but if you really want to grind it out and get Teleport on your entire team, make your whole team Time Mages. Not only will they be gaining JP for their own actions, but every other Time Mage on the team will also be getting that JP boost, so you can really start to stack these abilities abilities up very, very quickly. Number 11, check the in-game job descriptions for mechanical info. This is a nice new little feature to the Ivalice Chronicles in the party formation screen. You can actually see descriptions that give gameplay tips as well as mechanical insight for each of the different jobs. For example, in one of these menus is where you can see the information that chemists not only now have innate treasure finder, so you'll be able to just walk around and get random items with them, which is handy, but it also tells you that if you equip the normal treasure finder ability that you can learn on chemist onto a chemist, you'll actually have a higher chance of finding rare items, which is very, very cool. And there's a bunch of little tidbits like this, alongside just overall gaming info and gameplay ideas for each of the jobs. I highly recommend that you look at each of these every time you unlock a new job. You'll get some insight into what they can do. And honestly, I'll probably do a whole video talking about how each job functions with each of these little tidbits once I have all of them available to me. Very good insight here, extremely good addition to the game. Do not miss these menus. Number 12, don't let guests leech XP and JP. I know this falls a little bit into the combat scenario, could have included it in the previous video, but it has more of a bearing on your overall army growth, so we're going to talk about it here. Whenever you have guest characters in combat, anything that they do that is reducing enemy HP or taking enemies off the board is potentially them taking XP and JP from you that you would have otherwise earned. It's not the biggest deal sometimes, but there are some guest characters, like say Delita in Chapter 1, that you have for a long time, and over the course of multiple battles, especially if you're not trying to do too much grinding, you can actually miss out on some levels in JP due to these guests' actions. Now, this wouldn't be as much of an issue, however, many guests you have for a little while and then they just leave and they never join your party again. So it's not like you're being able to build them up. And even characters that are starting as guests and then do join you later as actual playable characters don't keep what they gained from when they were in the party as guests. So either way, you're missing out, and all of those points just poof into the ether once that guest is gone as a guest, regardless of if they join you later. Number 13, when building an army, don't discount monsters. Monsters have always been a potentially interesting choice in Final Fantasy Tactics, niche but viable, but a bunch have actually gotten buffs in the Ivalice Chronicles, such as the bomb, which we talked about in the previous video. Now, bombs can use their self-destruct ability to deal a massive amount of damage and apply oil to everything around them without actually getting downed, meaning that you can potentially heal them, do it again, just have them do basic attacks, be a blocker, whatever it is that you might need them to do. And there's a lot of different interesting utility options with monsters in this game as a result. I acknowledge you can't build them, quote unquote, so it's not as interesting as using another human character, but they do have some unique traits to them that can empower your other human characters. Think of them more as like a utility piece, or almost like a mobile piece of equipment that you use to enable a build with the rest of your party. I do highly recommend getting a mediator, having them learn beast talk, and then recruiting some of the more interesting monsters, again, like bombs, and seeing how they can help to complement your overall party. And finally, when leveling, keep in mind the job that you currently have equipped, as it will dictate what stat growths you get. This is always an interesting discussion because there are a lot of people who feel like it's really not important enough to really bring up, but I do think it bears mentioning because it is a mechanic that exists, and for people who either want to make sure that they're min-maxing or just like to keep this type of thing in mind, it is worth discussing. Like classes in something like Fire Emblem, every job has growth rates associated with it that will increase your stats when you level up in your normal levels. Again, keep in mind you have your normal job levels, and then you have your character XP, which is like your typical RPG leveling system. And Monk versus Chemist have very different growth rates. We're not going to go through them all here, but as a kind of easy rule of thumb, you have three major categories that classes and jobs will fall into: warriors, rogues, and mages. Warriors are things like monks or knights that are typically going to get good amount of HP, physical attack, etc. Rogues are more likely to have high accuracy, evasion, and speed. These would be like your thieves, your archers, your ninjas. And then mages, of course, are mages. Some will get more or less magical attack, like a black mage will get more magic attack than a white mage, but overall they're going to focus on magical stats, MP, that type of fun thing. So if you have a particular build for a character in mind, like you know that this one character is always going to be using physical attack jobs, you want to minimize the time that they spend in one of the other categories to make sure you can really lean into what their strengths are going to be. If you want to have a really badass dual wield punch monk, at the end of the game, you don't want that character to spend 40 levels in Chemist. As a very quick and easy example. Figure out some general intended roles for each character at the beginning of the game, lean into that role as you progress, and you'll find yourself in a pretty healthy spot by the end of the game. And that, my friends, is 14 tips for character building and army construction in Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles. As with the combat video, there is obviously a ton more that we could talk about here, but I feel like this is a good overall generalist view to help people get back into the game or learn the game for the first time if you are new to it, because I know we have a lot of new players in the community right now. And knowing how to properly actually kit out your characters in your army and to most efficiently do that as you progress through the game is one of the biggest aspects of Final Fantasy Tactics. So hopefully this helps you get into it a little bit more easily. As I said at the top, if you have any particular requests for topics or videos that you would like to see me cover, do let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to get to them in a timely manner. There's a ton of different stuff that I want to discuss, but of course, we have to keep making progress through the story so we can actually unlock some of the things that I want to show off. Like all the jobs, we're absolutely going to be doing a job overview video once I have access to all of them, as an example. For now though, I'm going to wrap this one up here. My name, of course, has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope that I continue to see you all on stream, as the streams have been absolutely phenomenal. And until the next time, I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, everyone. And remember, be good to each other, y'all. Bye now.